Joined at the top of the show today by Senator John Husted of the great state of Ohio, my home state. He joins us from his, I think you're in your office. You might be in the cloakroom. I have no idea where you are, Senator, but welcome back. Good to see you.
Yeah, I'm in the cloakroom right now, getting ready to vote.
No, that's good. Senator, what I wanted to get from you, I'm going to talk to Senator Collins later. I talked to Senators Blackburn and Cotton yesterday. The reaction in Ohio to the tariff announcement on Liberation Day. What are you hearing from people? Because Ohio's sort of bifurcated between parts that haven't boomed and parts that are booming right now. What are you hearing?
Well, I hear a lot of things. I've been talking to businesses who tell me that they're getting more orders, that they're doing well. And then you also have businesses who import a lot of things from China who are very concerned about how that will affect the cost, their ability to put their products together in the supply chain. But overall, I think people are giving the president the benefit of the doubt. I think they recognize that this is a reckoning that's long overdue and that they're going to give him a little latitude in trying to cut a fair deal for American workers and American trade.
Senator, you may not remember, I'm from Warren. Warren got hit
Yes.
pretty hard by the last 50 years. It was 60,000 people when I was born. It's 40,000 people today. The car companies have left. The steel mills have all but closed. There's a lot that could happen there. Youngstown's the same way. I'm sort of open to reshoring a bunch of stuff. So does it depend on where you live? Yeah, the old saying, where you sit decides what you see.
I think that's true. But I want to take a little bit of a look back because this is a reckoning that needs to come. It all started to happen, Hugh, if you think about it, really hit hard in 2001 when China entered the World Trade Organization. And then it kind of got lost because we had a terrorist attack, we had wars, we had some weak presidencies like under Obama for 8 years and Biden for four, where Biden was basically apologizing to the world for America's strength. Biden was asleep at the wheel. And there was only that 4 year period when President Trump was first elected that he sort of said, hey, we're going to fight back with some tariffs and begin to look at these issues. And it's a reckoning that we've delayed. The president passionately believes that he has the responsibility to fight this fight now and get a good deal for America on trade. And I think that most people are giving him some latitude. I think to hear that 70 companies, as we've been hearing, or 70 countries have said, hey, we want to come to the table and cut some deals with you. I think that's good news because it doesn't mean it will work out this way, but I think that there's a possibility that for consumers and for global trade, particularly with our friends and allies, that this could be a new day and a better day for us. And the other point that he continues to make is that China's trade surplus, not only with us, but with the rest of the world, is allowing them to fund their military and become a threat to all of us in the world. And a reset is necessary. And the president knows that there's going to be a little pain with this. People are giving him latitude, but I think that this has to happen quickly. We don't want this to linger on.
I agree with that, and I keep reminding the audience. I really don't know if this is going to work. I'm not an economist, and I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn last night. I'm a lawyer, but I'm going to give it 6 months to see what the markets think. I do not react to short-term market up and down, but a lot of people get upset, and 401k drops are a real thing, and you probably hear it. I mean, you're up for re-election this time.
Yeah.
You probably hear it.
And let's address that because it's not just wealthy people who have money on Wall Street. It's pension funds that teachers and firefighters and police officers have. It's union pension funds like construction workers I talked to today that are also see this hit. So let's not be frivolous about it. It takes your breath away for a lot of people who've seen what's happened in the markets the last few days. But I do believe we've seen some recovery, at least as I'm with you right now. And I do think, though, that if we can show progress, if the president says, hey, Japan's coming to the table, some of these other countries are coming to the table, we begin to show that we can sign some of these deals, set fair trade practices. It can be good for agriculture, good for manufacturing, and then we can see a recovery in a very short period of time. But none of us know.
Yeah.
People are giving the president some trust on this, but I do think that there's going to have to be a show of progress with some sense of urgency, or people will start to get nervous.
Which brings me to the biggest question. The Senate passed a budget over the weekend. It's probably your first vote-a-rama or maybe your second vote-a-rama, and they sent it over to the House. I want the House to sign it. I don't want to see anyone hold out. It would mean a signal to everyone in America that their taxes aren't going to skyrocket in 2026, which they're scheduled to do unless this tax bill happens. How do you feel about your colleagues in the House and the Senate budget, which revised their first budget?
Look, Republicans are in majority. We control the White House, the House, and the Senate. We have to show we can govern, and that means that every one of us, we're not going to get all that we want to get out of this. But it's a good framework that secures the taxes that we had locked in during President Trump's first presidency, hopefully making them permanent, which is good for small business. It's good for working families. It's good for American business. It's good for hiring. That stability that you get by locking this in is super important. I think a failure to do that is going to send a bad message about our ability to lead. I hope that the House will pass this, and then we'll get to the real work. This is just the budget framework. The real work begins when we get to the details about what you have to cut, what taxes we're going to put in place, what's the deficit look like. All of those things come later. This is just the blueprint. We got to get it done.
Are you an I mean, you talked to Jim Jordan, a friend of yours, another Buckeye.
Talked to him last night.
Yeah. What's he think? What's the buzz? Are we going to get it or not?
I think we will. I'm not a House member, and I don't want to predict, but I think that the mood is that we need to stick together, that this is the president's budget. It's got his priorities in it, including $150 billion to help secure the borders and deport criminal illegals out of this country. I mean, the money is in that resolution to get that done. And those are the kinds of things that we need to accomplish, and I think after the House, goes through its process, that they will stick together, support the president's budget, and we can move on to the next phase of this policy making process.
I hope you are right. Senator John Husted, I know I'm keeping you from votes. Thank you for joining me to open the show today. I very much appreciate it.
Thanks, Hugh.
That is a great opportunity. I appreciate him bopping in there and giving us an update. The House has got to pass this budget. If only, because if they don't pass the budget, you think last week's market volatility was high? Wait until the tax cuts loom. So there are a couple of House members that I don't like the budget, doesn't cut enough. You are going to be responsible for whatever happens next week if you don't pass this thing this weekend. And I'm sure Speaker Johnson, President Trump, Leader Scalise, Whip Emmer are telling them all, markets want some certainty right now. Let me do the market report, in fact, early today, brought to you by AmericanFederal.com. My friend Nick Grovich and his team, they buy and sell gold. They buy your gold if you want to sell it. They'll sell you gold if you want to buy it. And they'll do the same with silver, and they'll do the same with titanium. I actually don't know if they do titanium. Nick hasn't told me that, but they do gold. At this hour, and there's, 3/4 of an hour left before the market closes. Anything could happen. Markets are down a little bit. The Dow is off 0.05%. The S&P is down 0.6%. NASDAQ down about 1%. 10-year Treasury at 4.25%. Gold, some people bought on the dip. It's at $2,999 an ounce today. That's higher than yesterday. It's up about the same amount as the NASDAQ is down. And I assume that some retail customers came in and said, we think it's going to stay above 3,000 forever. So we're going to get this last chance to get a bid in at below 3,000. Now, $2,999 is not what you will pay Nick Grovich and his team at American Federal for an ounce of gold, or 10 ounces, or a gold bar, or 20 gold bars, no matter how much you buy. The more you buy, the lower the commission. I want you to understand that. But it will be transparent. You can trust Nick. They've been doing it for 40-plus years. He loves it. It's his passion. He got into it because of coin collecting, and then he learned how to buy and sell gold and how to develop the kind of reputation you want in that business, that you can be relied on, that you're not playing the float. that you're not going to walk away with people's hard-earned money and you're going to get them what they order, whether it's American Eagles or Canadian Maple Leaves or Krugerrands out of South Africa. 1-800-221-7694. The market is mixed yesterday. Now it's a little bit down today, but gold is up. If you want to buy gold today, 800-221-7694 or visit AmericanFederal.com. That's AmericanFederal.com. I want to explain to you, while I have my moment, what happened yesterday in Trump versus JGG. That's the Supreme Court case that came down. It is neither as enormous as the dissent makes it out, nor is it a giant victory for the ACLU, which the ACLU immediately went out and said it was. It is a modest decision that restates what is an obvious bit of the law for the benefit of activist judges who want to decide cases that are not in their jurisdiction. So I want you to understand, Judge Boasberg in the District of Columbia had issued a couple of orders with regards to everyone covered by President Trump's order under the Alien Enemies Act that the Venezuelan gang TDA had invaded the United States and that they were being removed pursuant to 1227. And he ordered everything to stop. And that went up to the D.C. Circuit, and the D.C. Circuit agreed that everything should stop. No more deportations until we've litigated this. And then went to the Supreme Court on an emergency appeal. 5 justices, all of the conservatives, but not Justice Barrett. Justice Barrett dissented in part. She didn't join the entire dissent. Not quite sure how to read what she is thinking here. I think she thinks that they're going too fast, but it doesn't matter. What matters are the 5. And I can remember, a long time ago, we're going way back, 1985, the Friday meeting at the Department of Justice, and 1986. The Friday meeting at the Department of Justice, all hands meeting, Attorney General Smith and then Attorney General Meese did the same thing. Friday morning, the heads of every major division, the Solicitor General and the Director of the FBI would gather around the main Justice conference room, and then the special assistants to the AG would join in as well. So I got a chair on the side. Nobody asked my opinion on anything. I just listened. And if Rex Lee said, the then Solicitor General, first thing you've got to remember is we got to be able to count to 5. And he would explain why he would not bring some cases to the Supreme Court and why he was bringing some cases to the Supreme Court. And I think he said it every week before he went through whatever the SG's office was doing that week. They're the people that litigate for the Supreme Court. And Rex would say, first thing we got to remember is you got to be able to count to 5. In other words, do we have a shot at winning? Don't want to bring cases we're going to lose. So the only thing that matters, bottom line, is that there were 5 justices here, and they agreed to dismiss the temporary restraining orders issued by Judge Boasberg and to relieve him of jurisdiction. He's out of the case. And I want to read to you, without all the asides and citations that make it so confusing for people doing legal reporting, the actual meat of the opinion. We grant the application and vacate the TROs. The detainees seek equitable relief against the implementation of the proclamation, that's the one from President Trump, and against their removal under the AEA, the Alien Enemies Act. They challenge the government's interpretation of the act, and they assert that they do not fall within the category of removable alien enemies. But we do not reach those arguments. Challenges to removal under the AEA, a statute which largely, quote, precludes judicial review, must be brought by habeas. Regardless of whether the detainees formally request release from confinement, because their claims for relief necessarily imply their invalidity of their confinement and removal under the AEA, their claims fall within the core of the writ of habeas corpus and then must be brought in habeas. And immediate physical release is not the only remedy under the federal writ of habeas corpus. For core habeas corpus petitions, Jurisdiction lies in only one district of confinement, the District of Confinement. The detainees are confined in Texas, so venue is improper in the District of Columbia. As a result, the government is likely to succeed on the merits of the action. That is it. They brought the case. They went forum shopping. They went to D.C. because the D.C. Circuit is left-wing. They went to D.C. because most of the district court judges in D.C. are left-wing, but not all of them. Senior Judge Leon, for example, old friend of mine. I'd gladly take any case before Dick Leon and know I'd get a fair hearing. Even if I was wrong, I did. And some judges appointed by Democrat judges are good judges. Some are bad judges. Some appointed by Trump are good. Some are bad. It tells me just. And Judge Busberg has a good reputation, by the way. But he blew the first thing, which is jurisdiction. And so I teach con law in a different way than most people teach con law. I repeat. And the students, they're not kids, they're grown-ups. The students get tired of hearing me saying, first question, jurisdiction. Second question, justiciability. And justiciability involves standing, ripeness, mootness, political question. And by the way, we don't issue advisory opinions, but everyone knows that. And if you're going to take a Professor Hewitt con law exam, you better begin with jurisdiction and then justiciability, including standing, which has three elements traditionally. Is it ripe? Is it moot? Is it a political question? By the way, we don't issue advisory opinions. Only active cases and controversies, and we don't give our opinions on things that aren't before the court. So jurisdiction is the first question. And the court here is saying, when you're talking about a petition for habeas corpus, which is produce the body, and the essential element here, when they get down to trying this in Texas, where the TDA people who haven't been removed are, who are subject to removal under that, I assume they will quickly file a petition for habeas, and that district court's going to have to make their decision on whether or not the exercise of the AEA is constitutional. It means produce the body. And so the defendants, in this case, illegal immigrants who are alleged to belong to TDA, they're brought into court under the Great Writ. And the question is, are you who the government says you are? That is, a member of TDA. And then, can your proposed removal pursuant to AEA proceed? Is that constitutional? So if you are who you are, and the government can prove that you're a member of TDA, then they have to argue the AEA, which has not yet been dispositively ruled on. And we have no idea how it's going to be ruled on. I tell you one thing, though. They're going to move everyone down to the Fifth Circuit because the Fifth Circuit is the kick rear end circuit for conservatives. They're just originalists. Judge Edith Jones is a liberal down there. That's a joke. Judge Jones is not a liberal. Judge Jones is a great judge. And Judge Jones was the chief judge for a while, and I've traveled a little bit with her and her husband, Woody. And I hope they get a panel with Judge Jones, because then I'll know the law will be right. They might get Judge Willett on the panel. I don't know who the district court, they'll get a good judge. So here's what the Trump people are going to do. They're going to move everybody to Texas. Everybody's going to Texas first, or the other Fifth Circuit states. And they're going to get the case there. And the ACLU's out there saying we won. No, you lost. You lost. You were in the wrong court. You were judicial forum shopping. And the Supreme Court said, go to the right court. You want to bring a writ of habeas corpus, and that's your only remedy. And by the way, they hint, they don't decide, but they hint, pretty big lift under the Alien Enemies Act. Pretty big lift ahead to get us to stop or stay the removal of a TDA. If you missed yesterday on the Salem News Channel, I interviewed the author of this magnificent book, Douglas Murray. The book is on democracies and death cults, Israel and the Future of Civilization. Tens of thousands of you watched it on Pluto TV or wherever you find the Salem News Channel. Many millions of you listened to it on the radio. Tens of thousands of you have now gone to my YouTube channel because you heard about it from someone or you saw my X account and you watched it. And thank you. More important to get the book and read it to understand. But the Douglas Murray video is over at my YouTube channel, and I think you would enjoy it. I also want to stress something. We have a sponsor, the Israeli Ministry of Tourism, and they sponsor GoIsrael.com. Those two things are unrelated. I'm going to have Josh Hammer on later this week to talk about his book about Israel. This is a book about 10/7. Josh Hammer's book is more important. But I welcome the Israeli Ministry of Tourism to be my sponsor because I'm a, what's the word, Philo-Semite? I don't know. I love Israel. They are our strongest, at least the equal of any of our strategic allies. They're innovative, they're smart, they're pro-American, they have nukes, they're bold, they're brave, and they're our friend and our ally. So I am so happy to tell you to goisrael.com is my sponsor. And there is no better time to go than right now. Lots of American news people are going to kind of catch up with all the news that's coming out of Israel, but it's the safest it's ever been. They've destroyed Hamas, they've destroyed Hezbollah, Syria, the Assad regime is dead and gone. Iran realizes if they peep, they're going to be dust. It's the safest time to go to Israel ever. So goisrael.com. That's part of the Ministry of Tourism, which is part of the government, and they do ask people, think about us. We're here. Great place, good deals. Now's the time. Go. You will thank me for that. I've only been twice. I'm going to go again. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt's been 3 times. She went on a mission trip once to build playgrounds in Jericho, but they also got some fun. And I went once when she didn't get to go, and I got to stay at the King David Hotel, and she didn't. So we're kind of even. She got to build a playground in Jericho. I got to stay at the King David Hotel. That's really not fair. I was traveling with John Bolton when he was National Security Advisor. So you're not going to get to the front of the line the way we did with John Bolton. But if you figure it out in advance, goisrael.com. They'll tell you how to do it, and you'll have a fabulous, fabulous time. Can I play Pam Bondi about the Supreme Court yesterday? Cut number 1.
Correct, Lawrence, and that's what was happening. These liberal district judges thought that they could control our entire country's policy, Donald Trump's policy, on keeping America safe. They cannot do it, and this was, again, a landmark ruling for the rule of law yesterday, and it's so important because these flights will now continue. These terrorists, they are foreign terrorists, they are alien enemies to our country, and we will continue to deport them. We are going to keep America safe, and a liberal district judge is not going to stop us. And that's what the Supreme Court ruled yesterday.
And then she said, cut number 2.
There is a hearing scheduled today at 3 p.m. He is not canceling the hearing. He is continuing on with the hearing, but the Supreme Court has spoken loud and clear. He has no jurisdiction. That flight will remain in El Salvador. Those inmates, those violent gang members, those violent alien enemies will remain in El Salvador. He cannot get them back. So his jurisdiction is over. So we'll see what he says today at 3 p.m. But going forward, these terrorists better look out.
I haven't seen a report yet. Judge Boasberg should say dismissed. I mean, you got slapped down by the Supreme Court. Dismissed. Not my case. Go to Texas. Joined by David M. Drucker of the Dispatch. David, greetings. I would like to ask you one big deal question. Is the House going to pass the Senate's budget?
I mean, they're going to do what Trump asked them to do eventually. It's just a matter of, whether it's this week or next week.
So they will. You're confident. Jim, I just had on John Huston, senator from Ohio. He talked to Jim Jordan last night, and he said, yes, we're going to go with it. What do you think?
Again, if the president is asking them to do that, if the president tells them this is what he wants them to do, that's what they're going to do.
What do you think would happen if they voted no, David, on the markets?
Well, I think the markets are too concerned by tariffs and the president's trade agenda right now. So I think the markets, might take a little hit, but they're taking enough of a hit as it is, as we're seeing as today's goes from up to down as we approach the closing bell. I do know that there are many Republicans, and I'm sure many in the business community, that are looking toward the tax cuts and other things that are going to be in this reconciliation package as some sort of salve for uncertain trade environment. But I don't think the markets, first of all, I don't think the markets in a normal environment would have reacted all that poorly to the bill failing, because bills like this often fail and then they pass. And so I don't think it really would have been that big of a deal.
Yeah, but I remember it very
TARP.
well.
This isn't TARP. This isn't TARP.
That's what I was going to. I was going to TARP. I think it is TARP if they vote no. If they vote yes, I think it will keep the market in the normal trading range where it's been for the last two trading days. Mixed yesterday, a little bit down today, just normal. The reset happened. Now they're going to trade in a range for a while. But if they turn down the tax cuts, oh my goodness gracious.
Yeah, well, listen, it would be one thing if they turned down the tax cuts repeatedly and the negotiations stretched out for months and months and months. But one bad vote for a bill that's not about saving the global financial system, but is simply about more tax cuts is not the same as TARP. And I just think the markets have enough to worry about right now than this. But even if they didn't have this to worry about, you might see a blip. But, when the market was above 40, when it was 42, 43, 500 points one day, no big deal. It comes back the next day.
Now, I want to ask you a question as an objective observer. I think the president's worst spokesperson is Peter Navarro, but I've thought that forever because I've known Peter for 30 years. He's a lefty. He ran for mayor of San Diego as a no-growther, and he lost. He ran for Congress as a Democrat with Hillary Clinton, and he lost. He ran for county supervisor in San Diego as a lefty, no-growth Democrat, and he lost. He's been a protectionist forever. And he doesn't do a good job on TV. But I don't know who does a better job. What do you think?
Well, I actually think Peter does fine on TV. It's what he's saying that might be the problem. But the problem then is he speaking for the president and the White House? And so far,
here's my disagreement, David. He does not. I watched Squawk Box this morning with Joe, and Joe asked him a direct question, and Peter didn't answer it for 10 minutes. I know he wants to do his talking point. That's what I mean about he's bad on TV. You get asked a question, answer the question.
Yeah, but people in politics never answer the question, Hugh. You know that. I mean, we do
I don't let him pull that crap. They don't do that. You answer my questions. You're in politics.
Yes, but well, I'm a journalist. I'm not trying to message something. I think, what we don't know, the whole thing about this is we hear the administration saying two different things depending on the hour or the day. Thing one is we've implemented all of these tariffs so that we can cut better deals, and then we're going to have free trade again. Thing two is we've implemented all of these tariffs, and they're going to stay no matter what because we want to reindustrialize and incentivize or force, depending on what word you prefer, all of these manufacturing jobs to come back and stay here. And so people, number one, don't really know what's going on. And thing two is a particularly bad option from a global financial perspective and even a domestic perspective, depending on who you talk to. And Navarro speaks for thing two, and he speaks for it very well. We don't have.
But he doesn't answer the question about quit thing one, which the president often says, I'll do a deal. Thing three, which sometimes Peter gets right, and I wish more people would say, China's a different category. China and their partners. We don't want to trade with them. We really do want to decouple with them. We don't want to have anything to do with China. That's thing three, right?
If yes, that is thing three. That can be thing three. I like that. And you know what? If that's all the president was doing, the market and the rest of the globe would not be in this predicament. I'd also suggest that a good way to box in China is to bring back the Trans-Pacific Partnership, tie all of those nations in the Asia-Pacific to us, which is what they prefer. And that really puts China in a box and really makes it a lot easier for us to decouple and put a lot of pressure on the Chinese financial system and their ability to finance their growing military and all of the other malign things that they do.
So my big question, David Bonson's coming on later. He hates the tariffs. I want to ask him about non-tariff trade barriers because I'm a lawyer. I'm not an economist, and I'm a broadcaster and a journalist. I'm not an economist. I've heard thing four is non-tariff trade barriers have got to come down, and we ignored them for too long. Currency manipulation, dumping, things like that. Has anyone explained that to your satisfaction yet, what we're talking about when we talk about non-tariff trade barriers?
The administration hasn't, and I think that's part of the issue. It has, right? Is it hasn't fully explained. People, look, whether you agree or disagree, people understand manufacturing trade deficits, and even there, economists disagree about what a trade deficit is and whether it matters or not, but people understand what it means. With all of these other things, unless you've been exposed to it or you read about it, you don't know. And, why should you? And I think, again, the administration is trying to do something very difficult here. Instead of focusing on one malign actor like China or one particular goal, whether it's like we need to grow our marine industrial base. So we're going to focus on those areas that help us build more ships, as an example. They threw 1 million balls in the air at once, and they're trying to shoot them all down before they hit the ground. It's a very difficult thing to do. It's a difficult thing to message. And the economy and the voters that voted for Trump want certainty that things are going to be better than they were, and this doesn't provide that.
Now, my only addendum or difference with you, David, is that we can't make that last judgment for at least 6 months. Because if the economy is cooking as it was pre-COVID under Trump in 6 months, then what they did at Liberation Day worked. And if it's not, it didn't. David M. Drucker on X, works for the Dispatch. Thank you. Thing 4. David Drucker didn't mention him, but Stephen Miller is actually the best messenger on pretty much everything coming out of the White House. Here he is with Martha McCallum last hour, cut number 13.
Yes, this is part of the brilliance of the president's strategy. If you look at those original reciprocal tariff rates that were announced, who got hit the hardest? China, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand. That's the China sphere of influence. The true trade deficit with China is $1 trillion a year because China is shipping all of its goods through other countries like Vietnam, like Cambodia, like Thailand. But also, it's sending its supply components through the EU as well that they're then making into our markets, through Canada, through Mexico. China is the destabilizing force here for the entire system of global trade. And everyone's put up with it, Martha, everyone. The EU's put up with it. Mexico's put up with it. Canada's put up with it. Japan, Korea, everyone. One man, one president has said, we are not going to let China extort, dominate, and control our entire system of international trade through cheating. All those factories that have closed over all those years because of China's cheating, someone is actually finally saying we're going to bring those factories back home. And yes, as you pointed out, making strategic trade deals that must be fair, again, to the American worker, that must reduce the trade deficit, but making those strategic trade deals with our trading partners around the world will isolate China further, and it will force China to come to the table and finally redress these decades of grievances.
Now, I want you to understand, I am for any policy that isolates China economically, because I was for any policy that isolated the Soviet Union economically. If they want to open their country to freedom of expression, free ideas, if they stop being a police state, they can join the World Trading Order. They ought to be out of the WTO. They ought not to get most favored nation status. They are not. They are the enemy of the West. They have gathered around them malign allies in the form of Russia, North Korea, and Iran, and Venezuela. They are acting imperially vis-a-vis Taiwan. They threaten the whole world. And by they, I mean Xi Jinping, the General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party. They are not our friends. And if that's the through line here, that we're not only going to force China to decouple with us, we're going to force everyone who's on our team to decouple from them. And you say, well, Japan's our ally. Well, yeah, but we can tell Japan, we're not going to be nice to you if you are nice to China. First ambassador was approved today. Very first ambassador to get out of the United States Senate under Trump 2.0 is Ambassador George Glass. Where is he going? Japan. Why? Because that matters a lot. Bibi Netanyahu talks to Donald Trump direct. We got to get an ambassador over there to Tokyo. And George Glass, who was the ambassador to Portugal in Trump 1.0, and I know him a little bit. Great guy, great, terrific guy. He's going to Japan, and they're going to work this out. Part of working it out is do not do pass-throughs on your goods from China. And by the way, ditto for Vietnam. We want port calls for our carriers in Vietnam. We want a lot from Vietnam. Time to make sure that they are isolating China too. You know what's weird? What's weird is I'm walking into the studio today and I run into someone who knows me, and everybody is the same way. How's Dennis? When's Dennis coming back? And then the third question was, is he going to finish Leviticus? And okay, how many times do you hear about Leviticus? Maybe if you're Jewish, you hear about it more. But Dennis has been writing books on the first 5 books of the Bible. and the Torah, and I don't think he's done with Leviticus yet, because Leviticus is actually the worst thing in the world to read. But yesterday I was reading Josh Hammer's new book. Josh Hammer is the senior editor at Newsweek, and he'll be on Thursday. His new book is Israel and Civilization. So last night I was reading about Leviticus. So I got asked about Leviticus today, and last night Leviticus is not my wheelhouse, but Dennis is. Dennis is going to be back, we think, in June. If you're missing him, go sign up for Pragertopia. For example, listen to this.
I asked Charles Krauthammer, what is the biggest difference between Canada and the United States? You will love his response. The motto of Canada is peace, order, and good government. The motto of the United States is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
I think that people do miss Dennis every day. I'm hopeful he's back in June. That's the plan. And so if you're missing him every day, go to Pragertopia.com, get his books as well. And he'll be back on the Salem News Channel and on the radio, I hope in June. I know what I am doing on May 1 and 2. I'm going to be in Savannah, Georgia. And I'd like you to join us there because my sponsor is the Job Creators Network. And I'm going to the annual Freedom Summit. And you can too if you buy a ticket. They're now down below 100. And if you want a ticket, go to jcn2025summit.com. That's Job Creators Network. Job Creators Network, JCN2025summit.com, JCN2025summit.com. If you're bringing a friend or you're going with your spouse, 50% off the second ticket if you use the promo code Salem. Now, it's not just me. It's Bill Bennett. It's Kellyanne Conway. I think Governor Youngkin's coming. I believe Governor Kemp's going to be there. People who believe in free markets, free ideas, and in the Republican Party. Oh, Job Creators Network can't say that, but I can. I'm a Republican. I believe in the Republican Party. Come to the JCN 2025 Summit in Savannah, Georgia. Go to jcn2025summit.com right now, and don't forget the promo code Salem. I told you earlier that there are good people who speak on behalf of the tariffs, and there are not so good people who speak on behalf of the tariffs. Here's a great exchange between the USTR, Jamison Greer, on a Senate hearing with Tina Smith about the trades, cut number 9.
So what I want to do is to get an understanding from you of what you see as the goals of this war that we're in, because at various times it's been described as goals to raise revenue, to stop fentanyl trafficking, close trade deficits. So is the goal here to raise revenue for the federal treasury?
Senator, this is not a trade war. We have, most countries have said they're not going to retaliate. We have an underlying emergency. The goal of this, of the trade deficit, where President Biden left us with a $1.2 trillion trade deficit, and the goal is to address that, and the offshoring that led to that, and the non-reciprocal treatment that led to that. That's the goal. Certainly there's a tariff revenue effect. If the countries do not do this, then they will be subject to the tariff, and we'll have a tariff on foreign goods instead of American-made goods.
So, okay, so if the goal is to close trade deficits, then that would mean that the tariffs are a negotiating tool here. Is that right? Is that how you see it?
So the
or
tariff.
are you trying to use them to?
Well, it can go both ways, Senator. So on the first, we've talked a lot about negotiations because a lot of these countries, they have closed off markets to our exports in unfair ways. They've done it for decades, and nothing has persuaded them. Sitting down, talking nicely hasn't persuaded them.
But if you were trying to, so I'm all for fair trade, and I'm all for the idea that if somebody is not trading fairly with us, if they're not giving us fair markets, then we need to have a strategy to go after that. But yet this is a blanket approach. It's an across the board approach, which is going to contribute to raising costs, and that's why it just feels, I think, so chaotic to people.
Well, the trade deficit is a global issue. So you can't if you're trying to get the trade deficit, you can't just pick one or two countries and say, we're going to do this and become Swiss cheese. Like that would not be coherent. What's coherent has a global approach to what's a global issue, to take these countries, country by country, figure out how we can address our trade deficit with them and address trade market barriers with them. And that's the right approach. And that's what's happening. That's what the president's directed.
But I mean, as Senator Warner was pointing out, I guess it's a floor, you could call it, a 10% tariff, even with countries where we have a trade surplus. And by the way, this formula that the administration used to assign this so-called reciprocal tariff it just seems so arbitrary. I mean, where did that formula come from?
It's straightforward and it's common sense. It came from White House economists, and they proposed that looking at a country's trade deficit is a good approximation of the net effect of the unfairness of the higher tariff rates, the higher trade barriers, the unfair trade practices, the dumping, the subsidies, all of that, and that's how you can capture that.
Well, so would you adapt that because it's based on 1 year, and of course trade surpluses, deficits can vary quite a bit from year to year. Would your plan be to change it if you get new yearly data? And then that would suggest, I guess, that the tariffs would be in place for a long time.
Well, we need to assess. Again, I think it becomes country by country. We have the baseline 10% to make sure there's no arbitraging of different jurisdictions. And all these countries that are subject to the highest rates, most of them have already come to talk to us about how to get it down. We have to take this step by step. We have to take it country by country to address these issues. The status quo just won't work anymore, and we can't do it piecemeal.
I'm not arguing for the status quo, Ambassador. I'm not arguing for the status quo, but I am questioning the rationality of this policy that is it's so chaotic, and it seems so arbitrary. And it seems so internally inconsistent because, for example, if your goal is to onshore manufacturing, something that I think many of us on this side of the dais believe strongly that we need to be making things in this country again, but then that would suggest that these tariffs need to be in place for a very long time because what capital wants is consistency and stability and predictability. Yet at the same time, the administration seems to be arguing that we would be, waiving some of these tariffs if we could somehow magically negotiate, 50 new trade agreements with 50 different countries. I know my time is up here. I wanted to ask you a question about trade adjustment assistance, which I will follow up as a question for the record. But again, I think that my constituents are freaking out here, and I understand why.
I think they're freaking out because you're from Minnesota and Tim Walz is your governor. I'm not freaking out. I don't like it when markets go down. All right? I don't. I prefer straight line growth. That's never been the case. And I've said it before. I'm saying it again today. This is my 7th market panic. It's not even really a market panic. It's a bear market correction. And they're unpleasant. I don't like to look at my 401k at the end of the day after that happens. Okay, the Dow is down 0.84 today. The S&P is down 1.57. The NASDAQ sold off at the end minus 2%. Gold is at 2998. You know who's happy? People want to buy a home. AndrewandTodd.com are one of my sponsors. I follow the 10-year Treasury because of that. 10-year Treasury was down today to 4.285. We need to get into the 3s. We need to get into the 2s. Not only do we have to refinance this massive debt that was left by Joe Biden's spending spree of $36.5 trillion, got to refinance that. We don't want to refinance it at higher interest rates. Got to drive the interest rates down. But all 30-year home mortgages are based off of the 10-year Treasury, or most of them are. Andrew and Todd have gotten some people into the 5s on a 7-year adjustable. And if you're betting on the future of America, which I think is always a good bet, that's a great rate. You got to call AndrewandTodd.com to get that rate. 888-888-1172. 888-888-1172. They are also helping people spooked by the market. Get me some cash. Get me some cash. I don't want to sell these stocks. They're down. How do I get cash? Well, you can get cash out of your house with a reverse mortgage or a HELOC, home equity line of credit. Guess what AndrewandTodd.com do? They do that because they are Sierra Pacific mortgage bankers. There was Sierra Pacific Mortgage. It's a bank. They do home loans. They do lines of credit. If you were counting on selling some stocks this week to pay your IRS bill for 2024 and your estimated quarterlies next year on April 15th, and you don't want to sell stocks and pull it out of your retirement then go get a HELOC. Don't sell them now. Don't ever sell when the market goes through one of these things. This happens every 8 to 10 years, like clockwork. And you know what happens afterwards? Recovery. Because we're the United States of America. Bet on America. If you need to buy a home, though, don't make a bet. Call AndrewandTodd.com at 888-888-1172. As you know, I live in 3 places. I live in California, I live in the Beltway, and I live in Maine in the summertime. I'm a family freeloader up there in Maine. So I have like 6 senators, but the only one who's in my party is Senator Collins. Senator Susan Collins joins me now. And she has brought to my attention, I didn't know this. I did know that Maine only has one Diocese of Portland. And I did know that we got a priest problem because there are like four churches in my parish there, Senator Collin. But I didn't know about the R1 visa. Nice to have you. Thank you for joining me. Tell me about the Religious Workforce Protection Act.
Well, it's so nice to talk with you, Hugh. So there are 50 Catholic parishes in Maine. 35% or 35 of the 50, more than half, in other words, rely on foreign-born priests and other religious workers who are from overseas. And what we have found is that there's such a long backlog in the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of State that their 5-year temporary visas run out before they can get their permanent work visa. And that means that a priest, for example, has to return to his home country for a year before they can come back. Sometimes it's even longer. And let me emphasize, all these individuals are well vetted. They're here legally. This doesn't have anything to do with illegal immigration. And they're providing essential services. They're saying masses. They're visiting the sick, the elderly, the dying in our hospitals. They're acting as religious educators. They're absolutely essential to our parishes in Maine. And there are other religions as well who are experiencing similar shortages. So this applies across the board. And essentially, it says that if you're here on a temporary visa for religious workers and the Department of Homeland Security is slow in processing your permanent application, that you can stay and continue to do your very valuable work.
Senator Collins, when I'm in California, the same issue obtains. A lot of the priests in Southern California are from South Asia and the Philippines, and they're here on visas. And they do have to go home, and they move around a lot. And people kind of like their priests. They want them to stay. So I was unaware that they didn't get an automatic extension until your office told me about this. I hope this is a bipartisan bill. It ought to be a bipartisan bill.
It is a bipartisan bill, and it's carefully crafted. It's narrowly tailored to the problem that we just talked about. And so I'm hopeful that we can get it through. I know it would make a huge difference. It has the endorsement of the National Conference of Catholic Bishops. It has the endorsement of the Council of Evangelicals. Major Jewish groups have also endorsed it. And I think this can make a real difference. It used to be when I was growing up that we sent priests out to the world. Now it's the other way around because there's such a shortage.
Almost everywhere except Northern Virginia. Northern Virginia, Bishop Burbidge over in Arlington seems to turn out priests by the dozen. I'm sure, is it Bishop Ruggieri? I haven't met him yet, and so I haven't met the new Bishop of Portland. But Bishop Vann in Orange County, California, they do a good job, but it still takes a long time to make a priest, and there's quite a shortage. So I would think, especially you just mentioned the National Council of Evangelicals, my Protestant friends will say the same thing. They get pastors from all over the world. I can't believe we send people home who are in the work of the faith, whatever the faith tradition might be.
It is incredible, or sometimes they stay here, but they're not allowed to work, and that doesn't make any sense at all. But usually they're sent home, and I remember just last summer where I go to Mass in Lincoln and Howland, Maine, and there was a priest from India, Father Tony, whom we all love. And he got sent home to India. So it is a real problem, and the backlogs are what are causing the problem. So I think that this will really make a difference, and I hope that we can get it through. It is a bipartisan bill. The chief sponsor with me is Senator Tim Kaine, from a Democrat from Virginia.
So I want people to know it's called the Religious Workforce Protection Act. It concerns R1 visas, and you should be for it. And if you see a senator or congressman, tell them to sign on to Senator Collins' bill. While I have you, Senator, a quick question about the budget. Congratulations, you got it done. Now it's over at the House. I talked to Senator Houston earlier from another one of my home states, Ohio. I've got more home states than people do baseball clubs. But I would like to know, do you think the House will pass this?
I don't know. I'm seeing opposition from both sides. There's a lot of concern about how extensive the Medicaid cuts could be. We definitely need reforms to make sure that able-bodied adults can, there's a work requirement. But the cuts are really too deep in Medicaid. And then on the other side, there are some conservatives who feel that the cuts aren't deep enough and that the Senate should have gone further. So I think it's going to be a challenge. But then again, every single time that people have doubted the Speaker's ability to pass a bill, he's pulled it off.
And last question, Senator, if they pass this, and I'm hoping the president and everybody works hard on getting that done, what parts of reconciliation come through your committee? You are chair of appropriations, probably the most important chair in the Senate other than maybe, I won't argue about it. It's a very important chair. What comes from reconciliation through appropriations?
Ironically, the way reconciliation is done, it goes through the authorizing committees rather than the appropriations committees. So it deals with mandatory spending rather than the discretionary spending, which is under our jurisdiction.
Of course, it wouldn't make any sense to go. It's the United States Senate. I am never surprised when I learn a new thing about the United States Senate. That's my new one for the day. Senator Collins, thank you for joining us. The Religious Workforce Protection Act is a great idea, and I compliment for you. I hope it passes and passes quickly. Thank you, Senator.
Thanks so much, Hugh.
I have actually 8 senators. All right, 8 senators. I got 3 Republicans: Bernie Moreno, John Husted, and Susan Collins. I got 1 independent, Angus King, 2 Democrats, Kaine and Warner. They're both good guys in Virginia. I know Senator Warner a little bit. And then in California, we got Adam Schiff and Alex Padilla. And I don't think Adam Schiff would talk to me if he passed me in the airport. But I love having Senator Collins. And Senator, I like them all. No personal animus in politics. At least there shouldn't be. Alex Gray is CEO of American Global Strategies. He was the chief of staff to the National Security Council in Trump term 1. He stayed out helming American Global Strategies during this term, although I'm sure they asked him to come back. Alex, I wanted to talk to a veteran of the Trump White House about the trade policies that have been announced. What's your reaction to them?
Well, frankly, Hugh, I think this is one of the president's more brilliant moves, candidly, despite the market reaction, despite some of the typical second guessing. Because, fundamentally, for me, this is about our national defense. And it's about the fact that if we don't have a manufacturing base, we're never going to be able to deal with great power competition with the type of potential conflicts that I think you and I both know are on the horizon. And I'm speaking primarily about the Chinese Communist Party. If we don't have the industrial capacity at home to repair ships, to build aircraft, to build tanks, we can't do the sorts of things that Americans assume, like the World War II Freedom's Forge model. Americans just assume that's a given. It's not. We were only able to industrialize for World War II because we had an existing industrial base that was already available to be retooled for war production. That base is gone. It was hollowed out over the last 35 years. And what the president's doing now is giving us this unique, once-in-a-generation opportunity to rebuild that manufacturing base. And I think if he does that, he will go down as one of our most consequential presidents.
Now, obviously, you're not going to tell me which of American Global Strategy's clients are happy and which are sad. But because you guys have such a long list of clients, someone must not like this, right? Someone must say, oh, gosh, we import too many parts. Have you had any of those calls yet where you just got to say to them, let's try and work it out, but, this is a reset?
Look, I think people right now are reacting to kind of uncertainty about which direction this is going to head. And so, across industries, across countries, I think the biggest thing that I've seen is a reaction that's basically, is this a negotiation? Is he going to try and get down to zero? Is the president going to keep the 10% universal tariffs permanently? What's the end game here? And I think he gave away, helpfully, a lot of where he's headed with his Truth Social post this morning after he spoke to the acting president of South Korea, when he said, I want one-stop shopping. I want to have negotiations with countries simultaneously, not just on trade, but on geopolitical issues, on defense spending, on foreign direct investment. And I think when he put that out, he calmed a lot of nerves because people now understand this is a negotiation. There is an opportunity to go. This was when the president talked about reciprocity, Hugh, he was trying to get down to a lower level of tariffs overall. But I do think, the 10% universal is probably likely to stay. And frankly, I hope it stays because the 10% is what will help us reindustrialize America and get back to the defense industrial base that I was describing earlier.
Alex, I've told people I'm going to wait 6 months to judge this because I'm a free trader. On the other hand, we aren't the rich relative that can bail out the world that we were when the Marshall Plan came down or after the Soviet Union fell. We're in a Cold War II with China, and the world's got to realign around that basic reality. Is that part of the calculation here, that we're not in the business of helping China surpass us on the global stage?
100%, Hugh. And I think what happened over in the post-Cold War era particularly, but also during the Cold War itself, was the U.S. made this calculation that we were so wealthy and our relative strategic and economic position was so advanced that we were able to, as my old boss, Peter Navarro, your longtime nemesis from California would say, Peter would always say, we can't sacrifice American workers and jobs on the altar of national security. And I think it's a good point. At one point, we were relatively wealthy enough to take economic trade-offs for strategic advantage. We can't do that anymore. And frankly, we're now having negative strategic effects because we have allowed countries like China, for the sake of larger objectives, we've allowed those countries to hollow out our manufacturing core, and that has very significant defense and national security implications.
Maybe Peter and I will finally agree on something. If he can get some countries to decouple from China and bring their business to here, then I'll be able to agree with Peter on something. But we'll see. We'll see, Alex Navarro. Not Alex Navarro, Alex Gray. Thank you, Alex. He is the CEO of American Global Strategies. I want to tell everyone as well, do not forget, we are on the Salem News Channel. We are now on Pluto TV. You can watch us every day if you want to watch us every day. Making plans to redo the studio to make it a little bit nicer in Alexandria, in all the various places I broadcast from, whether it's in Alexandria or Maine or here, wherever I am. I want you to see the same thing. So we're gonna make the picture better for you. So go over to Pluto TV or wherever you catch the Salem News Channel and tune it in. Meanwhile, do go to my YouTube channel and find yesterday's interview with Douglas Murray. I think you will find it to be extraordinary. Tens of thousands of you already have. So I want to let you know it's over at Hugh Hewitt on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Byron York joins me. He is, of course, a Fox News consultant. He is the Washington Examiner's man about town, and he's a regular guest on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Byron, there is a lot to talk about. I want to begin with an inconvenient law. The International Economic Emergency Act of 1977 empowers the president to issue declarations of emergency. But the Supreme Court invented the major questions doctrine a year ago, 2 years ago, that said basically, unless you've clearly been given the power to do something, you can't do it, executive branch. The lawsuit has been filed. I think it's been filed in the First Circuit in Massachusetts. Anyone talking about that in D.C., that the IEEA may have been stretched beyond its workable limit here?
Not. They're probably not as interested as you are, but this does fit in the larger theme, and it's a really big theme of the Trump administration so far, which is sketching the actual limits of executive power. Obviously, there were people who argued that the President of the United States could not fire a temporary employee of one of the executive branch agencies, and they're going to lose that fight.
Correct.
And there have been people who argued that the President of the United States can't order the enforcement of immigration law, and they're going to lose that fight too. So one of the things, and this is quite intentional with the Trump group, one of the things they thought about coming into office was reestablishing executive power. And they're not the first people to think of this. This whole unitary executive stuff has been going quite a while in the conservative world. But actually establishing some of the parameters of executive power that were just kind of fuzzy beforehand.
Well, you know, throughout the first 2 months of the Trump presidency, I've heard claims of constitutional crisis from my law faculty colleagues and on air. And if I chanced on any left-winger anywhere, they're telling we're not in a constitutional crisis. We are, however, testing some limits, like the Foreign Enemies Act, the Alien Enemies Act, AEA, has been around since 1798. The court upheld it in theory yesterday. They noted it involves quite a lot of judicial deference, but they did not yet rule on the authority of the president to designate a terrorist group a threat to the United States and deport its members following a habeas hearing and notice and comment, notice and representation to El Salvador. That's not over, but I think you're right. You're coming in high. And I mean, coming in high is an old British Navy team term, meaning you're going right at it. You're swinging. You're taking a big swing here.
Yeah. Now, especially specifically on the Alien Enemies Act, my guess is they want to prove the point and then not use it that much. They don't want to go through all the fighting. As a matter of fact, with the flight to El Salvador, I think they're kind of reducing the number of people that they are claiming were removed because of the Alien Enemies Act, or on the basis of the Alien Enemies Act, and which ones were removed on the basis of other legal arguments.
Yeah, one of the things that the per curiam opinion said, challenges to removal under the AEA, a statute which largely precludes judicial review, must be brought in habeas. First of all, that means as an immediate result, I think they're going to move everyone they want to deport to the Fifth Circuit. That's the friendliest originalist court out there. And I think they tipped their hand on the AEA being a legitimate exercise here. Do you read it that way?
I think you're right about that. This is, I think today was Trump's fourth victory in a row with the Supreme Court. Not all permanent victories. But what happened, I think the pattern we're seeing is Trump does something. Some district judge says you can't do that. Trump says we'll see you in court. And it takes a while. And now we're at the next step in court where Trump is winning temporarily. And then later on, and you know better than I do about how long it will take, he'll probably win permanently.
Yeah, I think there will be a loss or two thrown in there because they're going in every direction as far as they can, as fast as they can. But it is not a constitutional crisis. It's just testing the limits of power. And I like to remind people, it was President Obama who came up with the pen and phone nonsense. And it was Joe Biden who unconstitutionally forgave student loans. Not once, but twice. He ignored the Supreme Court the second time. That was really ignoring a court order. It seems to me, I'm just not taking seriously people who are worried about a constitutional crisis. They're just being aggressive on presidential power. Is there anyone in the administration warning to slow down?
In public?
Yeah.
I don't see that actually happening. There are, I think, Republicans. There are a couple of things that have disturbed me, which is when they make the case. The case of this guy from Maryland who has been relocated to El Salvador, who his advocates say he was like the dad of the year in Maryland, and the administration said he was, I believe, an MS-13 gang member. And the administration has said on several occasions that they've seen the evidence that he's an MS-13 gang member, but it's all been done on a trust us basis. They haven't actually produced the evidence. Now, is that because it's confidential or under some sort of seal in court? I don't know. But it would build, I think, a lot of public confidence if they could show that this guy was an MS-13 gang member and the deportation was entirely legitimate. On the other hand, they could also say, look, how many people were on those flights? Is it
250, roughly.
Yeah. They'll say, okay, we made a mistake and this guy's coming back. Everybody else is down there. So, I mean, I don't see why they couldn't say that because they have actually gotten rid of a lot of mostly TDA members who should not have been in the United States.
What the court said yesterday is everyone's entitled to adequate notice of their pending removal, which will allow them to bring the great writ, the writ of habeas corpus, and people are going to have to prove. The government's going to have to be prepared to prove for anyone who gets a lawyer, but they're going to do it in Texas, I'll bet. Byron, I want to play this after the break so people can see it on the Salem News Channel, hear it on the Salem Radio Network. So it's just one question. There are a bunch of people speaking on behalf of the president's tariff policies. They have different messages. Some are better than others. I've had like a 30-year running feud with Peter Navarro. I like Peter. I went to a concert with him once. But Peter's wrong most of the time. He's a lefty. He's a lefty protectionist. He's always been a lefty protectionist. He ran for mayor of San Diego County supervisor, Congress as a Democrat lefty no-growther. So I always argue with Peter. I don't think he's very good on TV, but I do think that Scott Bessent is fabulous. Who do you think does the best job defending the Trump policies, other than Trump?
Oh, the Treasury Secretary, without a doubt. That's Scott Bessent. I think, one of the things is I actually I spent some time watching MSNBC today and other coverage, and there seems to be this kind of a straw man in which reporter alleges that Trump announced these tariffs on Liberation Day, and the tariffs were going to be set in stone for the rest of the history. When in fact, they talked about that very day, Bessent talked about that very day, about that, how these tariffs would be the beginning of a negotiation process. And his message to the world, Bessent's message to the world, which was the president's message, was, if you want to negotiate, this is the highest it's going to be. In other words, he's telling people, you come and do some dealing, and these tariffs will go down. But if you fight back, they could go higher. And of course, we've seen that with the case of China. But it's very clear. Trump wrote a book called The Art of the Deal. This is all about negotiation.
Yes.
And I do believe they have a number of nations, they say 50, 60, 70, that they're going to talk to and that they are going to reach arrangements with.
I think you're right, Byron. I wish they would just let Bessent go out there, because when Peter goes out there and talks about revenue, that means permanence, and that alarms me. That means no negotiation either. Byron York, thank you, my friend. Follow him on X at Byron York. I'm getting ready to play for you the rest of the Byron York thing, but first, let me remind you, I'm in the Relief Factor studio. Whether you're watching on the Salem News Channel, listening on the Salem Radio Network, or one of our great affiliates, or you're even watching on the YouTube, Hugh Hewitt YouTube channel, or you're listening at HughHewitt.com, where the show repeats and repeats and repeats all day long. Relief Factor makes it all possible, because I got to have studios wherever I am, and Relief Factor builds them, and they keep me healthy. Got me up the implacable hill today. So call 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, or go to their website and find the first time offer for people who've never tried it before. You've heard me for a long time. Maybe you just discovered me because I moved to the afternoons only a couple of months ago, and you haven't heard about Relief Factor yet. I use it every day. It's the only supplement I've taken for 20 years. I've been taking it for more than 10 years. It's Icarian and curcumin, resveratrol, omega. It helps your body's natural anti-inflammatory system get rid of the minor aches and pains. Don't mask the pain with aspirin or Tylenol or Advil. Get rid of it. Reduce inflammation. That's Relief Factor. So call 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, or go to relieffactor.com. Have we got the rest of Byron York ready at this point? Okay, here's Byron. A bunch of people speaking on behalf of the president's tariff policies. They have different messages. Some are better than others. I've had like a 30-year running feud with Peter Navarro. I like Peter. I went to a concert with him once. But Peter's wrong most of the time. He's a lefty. He's a lefty protectionist. He's always been a lefty protectionist. He ran for mayor of San Diego County supervisor, Congress as a Democrat lefty no-growther. So I always argue with Peter. I don't think he's very good on TV, but I do think that Scott Bessent is fabulous. Who do you think does the best job defending the Trump policies, other than Trump?
Oh, the Treasury Secretary, without a doubt. That's Scott Bessent. I think, one of the things is I actually I spent some time watching MSNBC today and other coverage, and there seems to be this kind of a straw man in which reporter alleges that Trump announced these tariffs on Liberation Day, and the tariffs were going to be set in stone for the rest of the history. When in fact, they talked about that very day, Bessent talked about that very day, about that, how these tariffs would be the beginning of a negotiation process. And his message to the world, Bessent's message to the world, which was the president's message, was, if you want to negotiate, this is the highest it's going to be. In other words, he's telling people, you come and do some dealing, and these tariffs will go down. But if you fight back, they could go higher. And of course, we've seen that with the case of China. But it's very clear. Trump wrote a book called The Art of the Deal. This is all about negotiation.
Yes.
And I do believe they have a number of nations, they say 50, 60, 70, that they're going to talk to, and that they are going to reach arrangements with.
I think you're right, Byron. I wish they would just let Bessent go out there, because when Peter goes out there and talks about revenue, that means permanence, and that alarms me. That means no negotiation either. Byron York, thank you, my friend. Follow him on X at Byron York. Joined by Rich Lowry. He is, of course, the senior editor of the National Review and the host of not one but two podcasts, The Editors and The McCarthy Report. I listen to them both. There are two editions of The Editors and one of the McCarthy Report of each, and I want them to double both. So I want 6, Rich, 6. Now, Rich, I know what
productivity.
I know. That's how we got tariffs. We got to get productivity up. I know what everyone thinks at National Review about the tariffs. What I don't know yet, and I don't know if you've talked to Andy McCarthy yet about this, is that the president purported to use the International Economic Emergency Act of 1977. Conservatives were very happy when the Supreme Court first adopted the major questions doctrine and then overturned Chevron deference. And the former says big issues have got to either be expressed in the legislation, not assumed, and the second says we're not going to defer to the agency. Do you think the president's on good legal ground here to do what he did?
I don't think this is an emergency under IEPA. Emergencies are rare and brief. Congress says that, doesn't say it explicitly in the legislation. But the idea that we have an emergency because we have a trade deficit that we've had since the 1970s just doesn't make sense to me. We're not at war with any of these countries. We don't have hostilities with many of these countries that are friends and allies and have been for decades. And the executive, the statement of facts kind of justifies it as this is a national emergency because it's harder for us to make munitions and material important to our national security. But how does that affect what the price of a banana should be in the United States? And then finally, Hugh, I think if this power is in there in that statute, the statute's constitutionally questionable because Congress has the power has the taxing power, and it can't just say to the president, "You raise taxes on your own," and tariff's just a form of tax.
So I want to prepare my center right audience that I think it's going to be reversed by a district court in Massachusetts. I think that reversal is going to be upheld by the First Circuit, and I would not be surprised if it's 9-0 when it goes to the Supreme Court. I really wouldn't, Rich, that you cannot do this.
This question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just don't think you can do this. However, while that's working its way up the chain, I hope he cuts as many good deals as he can, right?
Absolutely. Look, I would not have done it this way, right? My approach would have been cut taxes first, then negotiate with allies, maybe hardball, if called for on tariffs and other trade imbalances, and then tariff China with a lot of preparation for the various sectors of the U.S. we want to come in to fill the gap. I just think it feels rushed, and you don't want to do what is being advertised as an epochal change to the United States economy and the world economy, on the fly, and that's what this feels like.
I'm going to have dinner tonight with an old friend of mine from Nixon World, who was part of the Nixon shock. I think he was there when the Nixon shock happened. I'm going to find out, when you tore up Bretton Woods, did you really intend to, did you know what you were doing? And I'll find out about that. Here, I think the target is China. And I heard one explanation. Part of the problem is there are 5 different explanations for everything. Whether you're talking to Peter Navarro, who's a lefty no-growther from California, where he ran as a Democrat for Congress, for the city of San Diego mayorship, for county supervisor. He lost every time. Campaigned with Hillary Clinton. He's a lefty no-growther. Or Scott Bessent, who seems to me to be a supply-side guy. Some of them make a good argument that we're trying to decouple China from the world economic dominance. That's the emergency. China's the emergency. I'd buy that, but it's not being made consistently or coherently, is it?
No. So we went through this the first term, a more miniature version of it. But the idea was going to tariff China, get our supply chains out of China into places like Vietnam and Cambodia, in effect, or maybe Mexico. Now we're tariffing Vietnam and Cambodia, where a lot of companies have relocated their supply chains. So what sense does that make? Now, you might say it's because China is using Vietnam as a transit point. Okay, that's a specific issue. Deal with that specifically with Vietnam rather than applying this 40% something tariff. So if at the end of the day you get deals with all of our all these major powers that are our friends, and you end up kind of ring fencing China and you end up decoupling with China, I think geostrategically that's totally defensible. Economically, it might be defensible. But this seems a needlessly reckless and self-destructive way to go about doing that. There would have been other ways to do that. And I have friends who, I'm not an economist, don't take my advice on the stock market or economic forecasting. There's some people think if you lifted them tomorrow, there would still be a recession just based on this disruption we've seen to this point.
Well, I'm going to have David Bahnsen on, and he's a doomsayer. I'm not a doomsayer. I think the market will be fine in 6 months. This is my 7th economic panic. 1987, Black Friday, go forward the dot-com bubble bust, go forward to 9/11, go forward to 2007 and 8 and the housing crisis and the meltdown, go forward to COVID shutdown. I've missed one. I mean, this happens. Markets panic. But you don't sell anything. Right? People should not sell anything. That's my economic advice, but don't. I'm worse than you are. I can't even spell economics, so do not take my advice on anything. But Rich, are there any naysayers? Are there anyone in conservative world, sort of traditional conservative world, who says, oh, this is a good idea?
It seems to me, Hugh, and this is a key tell for me, is that even people who are more protectionistly and more inclined towards protectionism than I am, think the implementation and the way they're going about it doesn't make sense. So it's hard to find many defenders who aren't just all in because they support Trump, they like anything Trump does, and they come up with an interpretation. Sometimes, it's legit and they've noticed things that other people don't, but come up with a 3D chess version for everything he does. So other than that, I don't see a lot of defenses out there.
Yeah, I think the best defense is give it 6 months, friends. And notice he's winning everything in court. So to my argument that the IEA is a bad foundation on which to build. I could be wrong. Maybe the court is going to say that China looms so large over the landscape, any proclamation that cites China. Let's go to China, and let's differentiate between Vietnam and Cambodia. Cambodia is a vassal state. If you go to Sihanoukville, there's a giant China port being built there. It's basically indentured to China. Vietnam, I think they've been at war with China for 2,000 years, and they only got their independence in 1430, and they've been at war with China more recently than we've been at war with Vietnam. So I really don't understand that. We want to have port calls for our carriers there, right?
Correct. Yeah. Vietnam, Japan, South Korea, Philippines, we want them to be as strong as possible and as close to us as possible. So if it's all negotiation tactic, and Trump said at this coal event today that the Japanese and South Korean officials are on the passenger planes as we speak, heading to the United States. If it's just a negotiation, we get deals in fairly short order. That's better than what we see now. But again, I still think there would have been better ways to go about it.
So I want to switch topics quickly. The Senate passed the budget. It's not what the House passed. It's different. We got a couple of people saying Massey's not going to vote for it. I guess Chip Roy's not going to vote for it. They can lose 3, maybe 4. I think it's going to be a very bad week for everybody if they don't pass this budget. A, do you agree with that? And B, exit question, will it pass this week, Rich Lowry?
Oh, man. Yes, it will be add to a bad week if it goes down. I favor the House version. If I had a vote, that's what I would be for. I want to cut more rather than less. But I feel as though we've seen this movie before, Hugh, and they always say, oh, we're going to vote against it. Doesn't matter what Trump says. And then Trump gets on the horn with them. Like, okay, actually, we'll vote for it. So my guess will be that it passes.
I think you're right. I hope you're right. I hope you put that question to the editors in the next edition on the extra supplemental emergency edition of the editors and Andy McCarthy as well. Thank you, Rich Lowry. Follow him on X at Rich Lowry and listen to the editors and listen to the McCarthy Report. Listen to Highly Concentrated Hugh. Listen to Dwayne's World. By the way, Dwayne's World, have you dropped to Dwayne's World anytime recently? Are you working this week or are you taking another month off?
Taping one with Jim Talent tonight. It'll drop in the morning, and it will have a lot of what Donald Trump did with the coal miners today.
What did Donald? You didn't tell me about that. You're supposed to be producing.
It just happened in the last 15 minutes.
Well, it's been 15 minutes. Where's my tape? Where's my audio?
You have nowhere to put it. You're wall to wall with guests.
I can play it for Lilacs. He knows a lot about coal.
He doesn't have a lot of knowledge about coal.
I think he does. Now you are the living testament that my PhD weightloss.com works.
I am.
864-644-1900.
That's
864-644-1900.
644-1900.
Have you recently talked to anyone who gave up on the pill popping and gained all their weight back? Because I saw a story about that.
I didn't see that story. Where was it?
I don't know. It's either the Financial Times or the Wall Street Journal because they're the only two things I subscribe
No,
to.
I haven't run anybody personally that's done it. I just know once you're on it, more than likely you're stuck on it.
Yeah, that's why I want you, before you try and go to the pill, try my PhD, weightloss.com, 864-644-1900, or maybe go sign up for it while you're on that pill so that when you go off that pill, you won't balloon. It's David Bahnsen. Oh, good. You're better than James Lilac. You know something about economics. How are you, David?
I'm doing great, and I appreciate that very nice compliment.
Well, you're actually, I called you today because I wanted a technical explanation of what a non-tariff trade barrier is, because that's been thrown around a lot. I know you hate the tariffs. Everybody knows that who listens to commentary or National Review. Everybody hates the tariff who's a free trader. But would you explain to me what a non-tariff trade barrier is, or at least the universe of them?
Well, I mean, it is an abstract term. A non-trade barrier or non-tariff barrier is a barrier to trade that isn't specific to the taxation that a tariff is. And so it's a sort of catch-all term for other things somebody can do to try to impede the flow of goods and services. And so the term was supposed to be a part of what the White House announced last week, and they instead chose to create the new policy. And this is what's caused all the mayhem in the economy around the trade deficit, just simply around countries that happen to sell us more than we sell them. So non-trade barriers are basically issues that aren't tariffs that impede trade.
An example that is often cited but never explained: currency manipulation. In response to the Liberation Day announcement, China devalued its currency. What's that do to me and to Americans, David Bonson?
Well, most people want to live in a country with a strong currency. And the question is what we mean that they devalued. The yuan went down relative to the dollar. The dollar went down relative to a bunch of other currencies substantially. One of the biggest down days for the dollar, Friday. The reason you're right, Hugh, that a lot of people don't want to define it or get into it is because it's a very tricky thing for America to have to define when we're not exactly squeaky clean here with $9 trillion of quantitative easing that took place after the financial crisis and COVID, or running ourselves at a 0% interest rate for the vast majority of the last 15 years or so. There's now been 2 years we've been off the zero bound. Those are all things we did to affect our own monetary policy. But they have the impact, of course, of manipulating our currency relative to others. Other countries are doing the same. And what the only governor to that is market forces. China weakens its own currency enough, it hurts their ability to transact. So I've now gone through this 3 times, Hugh, in my career, where China was manipulating their currency to the downside during the Bush Jr. administration. They were then manipulating their currency to the upside during the Obama administration. And now they're allegedly manipulating it to the downside again. So there's different policy goals that countries have at different times.
So how do we measure that whether or not that's a trade barrier? Because the formula that the White House put out, even if it makes sense to you, it doesn't make sense to me. And if you listen to Scott Bessent or Peter Navarro or the Secretary of Commerce, Howard, I can't remember his last name, you get a different, Lutnick. You get a different explanation, right? No one has the same set of talking points.
Well, this is a part of the big problem right now in markets, is exactly what you just said. Markets have noticed the same thing that you and I'm sure our listeners have noticed. There's not just different talking points, but in some cases, quite contradictory talking points.
Yes.
In terms of how to measure if currency is a non-trade barrier, I'll rephrase the question. How do you measure if a policy at a store is a barrier to doing business? If all of a sudden you notice people are less likely to do business. So to the extent that China weakens its currency or strengthens its currency one way or the other to a point that it impedes trade, you would see it in declining trade. Now, I have absolutely no doubt that China would like to use its currency as a weapon to benefit itself in trade. And I have no doubt the United States would like the same. And I equate that basically to how buyers and sellers have different interests. And if we're not going to be linked to a global standard, if we're not in a Bretton Woods system, which is what Secretary Bessent has criticized, then countries are going to do that. The way to stop it, of course, is through market forces.
So let me make sure I get you to weigh in on this. When World War II ended, we were the only people that we were the only economy left standing that wasn't bankrupt or destroyed. So we could afford the Marshall Plan. When the Soviet Union fell apart in 1991, we were the rich relative that could bail everybody out in the Eastern Bloc. We could do lots of things for people. This is a new world where we're back to bipolarity and we are in Cold War 2.0 and China is our enemy. Does that, in your view, justify any of the measures the president took last week?
It makes it all worse. Because if that is the case, if your premises are correct, which I'm mostly willing to grant, because you and I are equal footing as anti-communist.
Correct.
Hugh, why in the world would we mix Japan, South Korea, India, Vietnam, Canada, Mexico, allies, in the same mixed bag with China? All we had to do to get the most maximum leverage with China is separate everybody else. Go through and work the different trade deals, economic deals, what the currency package was going to be. There's a whole lot of things that could have been done. Then go deal with the China problem separately by putting it all together. it has weakened our hand with China substantially when we had a much stronger hand 2 weeks ago.
Now, David, sometimes you have to shout to get the room to shut down. So the president shouted at the world. Best possible explanation. President needed everyone's attention, wanted everyone in the room so he could tell them all, Cambodia, you don't get to come in because you're basically a vassal state. Vietnam, we need you to help us more. We don't want you to cross-ship Chinese goods. Mexico, we don't want China sending fentanyl precursors here. Japan, we don't want you adding value. And EU, we don't want you dealing. Maybe he just wanted everyone in the room.
Well, I think you know that I disagree with that interpretation and believe as a conservative in limiting principles. I think that there's a French revolutionary spirit behind getting the attention of everyone in the room. But in this particular case, I do believe in law and order. I believe in the constitutional methodology of how taxes are supposed to be imposed. But also, I believe in dealing with allies different than adversaries in terms of a foreign policy of moral clarity. I also don't believe that we got the attention of people by threatening to tariff Switzerland, who has no tariffs on us, or by cutting off the flow of coffee and bananas into a country that can't make its own coffee and bananas. What we've done is message an incoherence. And so that's where my criticism comes from, is I think there's a lot of things he wants to do that I want him to do, and I think we went about it the wrong way. But Hugh, ultimately, we have to define the objectives. You used the Cold War 2.0 analogy. If we're going to continue equating this with geopolitics, foreign policy, military struggle, you have to define the objective. And is the objective we want to buy less things from other countries?
No, the best case I can come up with, and it's not comprehensive, is that we intend to isolate China and to do so quickly in order to cripple their economy and perhaps divert an invasion of Taiwan. But I know it doesn't answer every question. But then again, you didn't give me a perfect definition of trade barrier, David Bahnsen. But I still go to dividendcafe.com every day, as you should, to get what David writes, because he's really, really smart on this stuff. David Bahnsen, thank you. Joined by Lilacs, as in lilacs.com. You are probably a fan of Dining Out with Jim Lilacs. That's his weekly podcast on eating out and around the Twin Cities. James, what is your favorite restaurant in the Twin Cities?
Well, we don't go. Actually, we have changed the entire podcast to dining in. So it's people bringing food into their house, who, once again, you are just a week behind the curve. But I have to say, I'm a big fan of the little fish and chips place down the street because it's an English pub in all respects, except for having a lovely little dog in the corner and a fire cracking in a building that's 700 years old. But otherwise, it's great.
Are they open at all hours, and do they serve alcohol to people under the age of 14 like every other pub in England?
No, they're not open all hours. They don't carry traditional British pub hours. I do have a favorite British pub that I'm looking forward to going to this summer, where when I walk in, I'm hailed as the American, which I like. And, we'll see if it's the same this year. It could be something entirely different. Oh, the American. But, it's obviously their way of saying, we forgot what your name is, but I still like it.
Now, Lilacs, you, like me, keep an eye on the whole conservative ecosystem. I haven't found anyone who likes the president's trade policy. Have you?
A few random people on Twitter are saying, yes, this is medicine. We need to suck it up. We need to take it. It's better for the future. I, too, am retiring soon. This is painful for me, but it's necessary. I don't know. I've seen a few of them, but generally the people who are writing about it don't like it at all. I mean, I don't like it. You have a day like today where you're being whipsawed back and forth by the market like Faye Dunaway's head in Chinatown when she's saying, my sister, my daughter, my sister, my daughter. I am sticking the course. I've got Apple stock, and I've decided I'm going to hold on to both of them. But it's not fun, and I don't hear people not a lot of people who are
okay,
on
so
this because they see it as unnecessary. And could we do the other stuff and maybe roll out some tariff stuff? But again, the shock therapy, the medicine, all the rest of it, there's nothing you can do.
Would you think that the House of Representative Republican majority could be so dumb as to not pass the budget in this atmosphere where they might actually add some certainty to people's taxes and their long-term planning, and otherwise assure them that the tax code will be extended? That would be a wonderful balm on people's nerves.
It would be to make the tax cuts permanent, to have another 150 billion for defense, to increase the wall, to do all these things and do them in a legislative form, which is kind of what we like. We don't, even though some executive orders may have the power, and it's entirely invested in him, we still like to go through the process of, writing a bill, passing a bill, as opposed to continuing resolution and the rest of it. But here's the thing. You started out by saying, could the Washington congressional Democrat or Republicans be so stupid? Stop there, because we know the answer to that.
Okay. Now I want to switch subject. I don't know if you listen to the Ruthless podcast. It might compete with Dining Out with James Lilacs.
Dining
In with James Lilacs. It'll have a new name next week. Doug Burgum, the Secretary of the Interior, was their guest this morning, and his stock phrase is "Go north, young man," because AI needs stranded natural gas, and it helps when it's cold outside. He's from North Dakota. You think you're from North Dakota. Is he actually playing the crowd?
The crowd, if you want political fortunes to rise in this country, playing to the North Dakota crowd doesn't really get you a lot. I mean, there's about 700,000 people up there, but he's right. The great thing about North Dakota is that you can build data centers there, which require huge amounts of air conditioning to cool. But you've got natural cooling. Just build them up in Bismarck or Minot or somewhere, and you don't even have to install an AC. They'll be kept cryogenically cold by the Canadian winds, unless, of course, the Canadians put tariffs on the cold winds
on their wind.
Down, and then on their wind.
The other thing he said, though, he used the term stranded natural gas. I consider myself fairly smart. I've never heard that term before. What is stranded natural gas? Is it like people in a snowdrift in Fargo?
No, I think it refers to gas that's up there. It is not recoverable easily, but can be recovered, I think. Don't quote me. But we got a lot of resources up in North Dakota, and it's great. I mean, it booms, it busts with the fortunes of oil. But he's right. Go northeast, young man, and you will find that Fargo is a remarkably wonderful little cosmopolitan town.
Has it become impossible to buy a house there like everywhere else where people want to move for AI purposes?
No, they are, because there's no NIMBYs in Fargo, because there's no California regulators in Fargo. And I'm sure that they're cracking down in some ways. But every time I go out to Fargo, another huge tranche of potato land or farmland or something has been consumed by houses sprawling in cul-de-sacs. They keep building because North Dakota has a lot of land. There's nothing to keep. There's no natural barrier that says, oh, we're done building houses now.
The other thing I learned that you've held on me for 30 years for is that bison is pronounced with a Z, not an S, bison, and that the plural of bison is bison.
Wait till you learn until we really call it bison, and we just don't tell the outsiders.
They're trying to reanimate the woolly mammoth as well, and I'm not kidding. Lilacs, thank you, lilacs.com. Governor Greg Gianforte, Helms, Montana, and he's at the White House today, and I want to get to that. But I got to begin, Governor, by telling you the Ruthless podcast today featured your buddy Doug Burgum, and he managed to work in that the North Dakota State Bison beat the Montana State Bobcats on a podcast that's listened to everyone. He must just gig you whenever he sees you.
I saw the secretary in the East Room in the White House today. He said the same thing to me, and I told him I think bison is delicious.
That's the other thing. They said they're trying to reanimate the woolly mammoth. I'm not really in favor of that, Governor. You probably got some woolly mammoth up there too. What do you think about the dire wolf coming back to life?
I could pass.
Yeah, I'm with you. Do you have a grizzly problem in Montana as well?
We're due. We're thick. They've been fully recovered in their traditional range for 20 years. It's like Hotel California. You can check out, but you can never leave. We need to get them delisted. We petitioned the Biden administration, and they sat on the petition for 3 years. They're supposed to get back to us in 90 days. And then finally they came back and said, nope, nice try, too bad, we're not delisting.
Well, why didn't you bring an EO to the White House today and just put it on the president's desk? He'd sign it.
Well, we're going to get there. I mean, he's moving on so many areas, and that's what we were doing today. I mean, literally, he was pulling the plug on Joe Biden's failed energy policy and switching on coal, beautiful, clean coal. That's what we're doing at the White House today.
Now, let's talk about that, because Doug Burgum also mentioned on Ruthless that the coal up your way is absolutely clean, and that China is pit digging, open pit digging with no reclamation, dirty coal. What did he do today? What did you applaud today?
Yeah. So President Trump signed 4 executive orders to eliminate discrimination in federal agencies against coal so we can have an all-of-the-above strategy. He also authorized the Department of Justice to go after states that have biased policies to shut down coal production. He signed an EO to speed up permits. So it was really a comprehensive approach to get rid of bias in the federal government and to remove red tape so we can work with beautiful, clean coal. He also authorized funding for advanced technologies in the use of coal in power production so that we can burn it more cleanly and produce the power. In Montana, Hugh, I don't know if you know this, but we have more coal than any other state in the country. We've been keeping the lights on in Montana. We've been keeping the lights on in Seattle for decades, and we ship an amazing amount of coal to Japan. We're keeping the lights on in Tokyo as well. This is one of our most reliable, stable sources of energy, and it was great to be in the East Room today because it was filled with miners. And one of the miners got up and talked about how this has made a difference in his life and for his family. Very touching. He got a standing ovation.
Governor Gianforte, does Montana have rare earth minerals? Because we're kind of over the barrel vis-a-vis those and our adversary, China.
We do. We have deposits. Our Montana Tech has an inventory of all these minerals. We've been having discussions with folks about how to get them. In fact, one of the interesting projects we have going on in Butte, Montana, is in the Berkeley pit. We're actually taking the water that's been filling that pit up and reclaiming it, producing, beautiful clean water, and in the process taking the critical minerals out and generating revenue. So here's a reclamation project in Butte, Montana that's generating revenue and cleaning up the environment.
Last thing I want to quote back to you from your friend, Secretary Burgum. He said, "Go north, young man, if you're in the AI business and you need to build a data center because you want them to be cooled by the environment as well as by stranded natural gas." Does the same set of circumstances apply to Montana as does it to North Dakota?
Absolutely. And we are a net energy exporter. Our portfolio in Montana is 60% renewable today. Most of that's hydro, but wind and solar, of course, coal, natural gas, and we're exploring small modular nuclear. Just the businesses we're talking to in Canada, including many AI data centers, they need massive amounts of power. We have it in Montana. We're building more. And one of the highest costs of a data center is air conditioning. Well, when it's cold outside, you just blow a little air in from there, and it dramatically lowers the cost of operating these data centers.
Has that impacted the actual location of the data centers? Because a lot of them, if you look around the Beltway, there are a whole bunch of AI centers being built in Maryland and Virginia. I don't know if they're in the district or not. Are you taking business away from the Beltway, which would be a good thing, by the way, if you took it away from the Beltway?
It's early. We have probably half a dozen discussions underway with data center and hyperscalers about where to locate in Montana. We've had to get the fiber in the ground. We need the excess power, and you have the ambient temperatures. All of it's a great equation for building data centers.
All right, last question, Governor. Joe Biden bragged on the infrastructure bill, and a part of that was for fiber to rural America. Did it get into Montana? Did they do anything in Montana? Because that's as rural gets. I've watched 1923.
We were the first state to roll out the bid process for the funding for the broadband. We've gotten money on the ground, close to $1 billion in Montana burying fiber.
Okay. Now, and is that a good thing? Do you recommend that as something that ought to go forward?
I think, if you go back to Adam Smith talking about the purpose of government, one of those is infrastructure that can't be paid for in any other way. We did it for rural electrification. We did it for rural telecommunications. I think there's a role for rural broadband in that same vein.
Thank you, Governor, and go Bobcats. I'm not going to let Doug Burgum get away with slandering the Bobcats. Way to go, Governor. Yeah. Thank you. Keep coming back.
Go Cats.
Okay. I want to close today's program by encouraging all of you to call your congressman and urge them to pass the Senate version of the budget, which was the House budget with an additional line of text. Some members of the House don't like it, but it will be mayhem in the markets if it fails. Here's Mike Johnson on Fox News this morning, the speaker, talking about it.
We've got to pass that, the Senate amendment, so that we can get to the next stage. The next stage in the process to deliver on President Trump's America First agenda is to get to the point we've all been waiting on. We've been working on this in the House for over a year to get to this point, to draft the actual reconciliation bill. And in that bill, Sean, we're going to do, the reason the president calls it the one big beautiful bill is because we're going to deliver on all these promises we made to the people, all the America First policies. We're going to restore the border, make sure we have the funding to do that well and right and permanently. Sean, we're going to add American energy dominance provisions. We're going to make sure we restore peace through strength, put in all the funding mechanisms to handle that and follow through with the president's orders, while also incorporating what DOGE is doing to make government work more efficiently and effectively. And most importantly, Sean, maybe equally important to all that, is that we're going to make sure we don't have the largest tax increase in U.S. history at the end of this year, which is what would happen by default if the president's Tax Cuts and Jobs Act from the first administration expire, which is what will happen. So all that will be moving forward, but we have to keep the House and Senate Republicans working together as one team. We unify, we will accomplish this mission.
That's the speaker. Here's the majority leader, Steve Scalise from Louisiana, on Fox Business with Maria Bartiromo today, cut number 7.
Look, I've been urging my colleagues in the House to move on this bill as quickly as possible for a lot of reasons. Yeah. One is to get the economy booming. There is a lot of pent up, and you probably talk to people like I do that say there's trillions of dollars sitting on the sidelines waiting to see if there's going to be tax certainty. Because if there's a $4.5 trillion tax hike, meaning if Congress does nothing, that's the kind of taxes that go up on every American. Nobody would be immune from it, and it would crush the economy. Yeah. So we need to get this tax bill in place to give not only certainty to the economy, but to bring that investment back in and get real economic growth.
That is, to me, it is so easy a vote because it does promise a chance to retain the House. Now, the title charts of American politics is the Republicans should lose the House in 2026. They don't have to. They will if they don't pass the Senate budget. Because if you think the markets have been wild for the last week, wait until they do not pass the Senate budget. And then we might end up with a replay of the TARP. Oops! When the market crashed, when TARP went down the first time in 2008. And then all of the both sides of the aisle came back and passed it. I don't think Democrats care if your market value crashes. They want Trump to lose so bad. But to the Freedom Caucus members, get your head straight. Get in there and vote yes. It's not perfect, not what you wanted, but he did put the tax bill in there. The Senate didn't want to put the tax bill in this, and they did. So you got that you got the one big beautiful bill, and it's almost what you wanted. So vote for it, and don't give us a speech as the markets crash for a third week.